Good morning. How's everybody doing today? Let me, as always, I gotta do my checks. Gotta always check. Looks like we're live. Looks like everything's working, and I think I got the cross chat finally working. So let's make sure we got audio. Yay! Man, we are slowly doing it, friend. So thanks for joining. As I said in the title, we have we're going to look at some old world news. We're going to go over the the magic. Maybe we'll do the music. Who knows? But we're going to go over the magic, and we're going to talk about the Bretonnian previews that they have done, Games Workshop, and we're going to go through all that, and we're going to get my thoughts on it, and we're going to talk about whether or not I think it's a positive or a negative. I have briefly glanced over this, but not in depth. So you're generally going to be getting my first take. So let's dig in. The Old World Almanac: How Magic Brings a Sparkle to the Battlefield. Very, very sparkly. Oh, oh, you don't need that. I need that. That's for me, friend. Let's see. And it says we're connected. So if you're watching, drop something in the chat so I can make sure it's connected. What would Warhammer be without magic? Without that ever present risk of having your proud regiment of silver helms toasted by a well directed fireball, or your black orcs grappled by the dwellers below. The four phase structure of Warhammer The Old World is perhaps the biggest break with the previous installment. Come on, guys. Uh, not to nitpick, but it drives me crazy. Oh, I'm sorry. I've got the wrong screen up. Let's fix that. How's that? That looks better. Drives me crazy when they're as big of a company as they are. And I don't think the word installment is spelled differently in Britain than it is in America. So maybe it is. Maybe there's an extra U in there, like armor and color. But is perhaps the biggest break of the previous installment of Warhammer Fantasy Battles, not least because there's now no set magic phase. Doesn't mean the arcane arts take a backseat. If anything, magic is even more prevalent as it's cast during every phase of the game. So, I think before we dig into this, I had said I think we're going to just a Warhammer AOS or 40k style magic. I cannot read this. There's an ad break coming if you're on Twitch. Sorry, I'm seeing something and I need to read it. I don't mean to stop what I'm doing. Boop, 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 boop. Turn you down. Can I read it here? Oh, gosh. Nope. All right. I was just informed by my lovely significant other that it is spelled differently in Britain. So thank you for that. Good to know. I'm over here getting on my soapbox about them. Not that they don't have a lot of typos and grammatical errors in a lot of the things that they write, but it turns out, yes, if you live in England, you probably do put one L in it. That does not surprise me. But it doesn't mean they take a back seat. If anything, magic is more prevalent as it's cast during every phase of the game. Wizardry, 101. We're going to Hogwarts today, guys. The old world is set at a time before the colleges of magic were established. Imperial wizards were still very much around and tapping into the eight winds, but the study of magic had yet to be formalized in human lands. It doesn't mean there aren't lores, blah, 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 blah. We don't need all this. Let's dig in. Each lore has 7 spells, with one being a signature spell that's always available to its adherents. Every magic user has a level ranging from 1 to 4. The higher the level, the more puissant the wizard. I know I didn't say that right, and I don't care. and the more spells they know at the start of the game. So I'm guessing, before we dig into this, that you still just add your wizard level to the check. So if I am going to cast a spell, I think it's going to be 2d6 plus the wizard level. And the signature spell, I assume, is going to work very much like they effectively do now. Because I want to say there's signature spells in Sigmar. I could be wrong on that, but I think there is. There definitely was in Fantasy, and the signature spell basically like you just always had it. And then you got to pick another one or whatever, right? Spells fall into 6 categories. These determine during which phase of the game they can be cast. These are enchantment, spells that empower the caster's allies, protecting them with sorceress wards and magically enhancing their fighting prowess. Hex, they're the opposite, so they're buffs. Hexes are debuffs. Conveyance enables spells to enhance movement or transport units from place to place. So that's going to be things like to jump or anything that increases your mobility, which is interesting. I assume those will get cast in the movement phase, but that's interesting that those aren't just buff spells. I guess they lumped them together because of the teleport, like your jumps and stuff like that. And again, it makes sense. Magic missiles, and those are just spells that do damage, you know. Magical vortex, these are roiling globes of magical energy that travel across the battlefield, wreaking all kinds of havoc. So I wonder if these are going to be like your unending spells, the ones with permanence. I can't think of the word for it right now. Summon spells. What the hell are they called? Endless spells in Sigmar. I knew if I just said the word spell enough, we would get there. So I wonder if these are going to be like your endless spells. And I forget what the tag they had in fantasy was, but they had similar things that existed that just stayed on the battlefield. And then assailments are deadly attacks that strike the foe without warning. So I'm curious to see what the difference between an assailment and a magic missile is. There are 6 types, blah, blah, blah. Each conjuration. These are cast in the. So each conjuration has a casting value appropriate to how complex it is and cast on 2d6, which is what I figured when we started seeing the casting values early in the releases. I kind of assumed this was the system it was going to. We weren't going to have the 5 billion dice pool that you saw in the earlier editions of the game. And even in 8th Ed, they had the dice pools, but they interacted a little differently in 8th Ed than they did in 6th and 7th. And then you add the skill. Yep. Okay, so it's 2d6 plus your level. It's a quicker system than previously used Winds of Magic cards or pools of dice, leaving the tactical decisions of what to cast and when. So basically what we're doing is we're getting rid of all of the dice pools. We're not doing the Winds of Magic check like you did in 8th where you rolled 2d6 and that's how many dice you got. And then in the previous editions, you just had a massive pool based on how many wizards you had, etc. This is just you roll 2 dice, you add your caster level, blah, 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 blah. You miscast if a natural double 1 is rolled when making a casting roll, regardless of the casting result. So if you have a level 4 wizard and the spell goes off on a 5, even though you rolled 2 1s, plus 4 is 6, it's still a miscast. And unless stated otherwise, is not cast. So double 1s, auto fail, auto perils if you're coming from 40k, right? That's what we're looking at. You will roll immediately on the miscast table and see what fate befalls your unfortunate wizard. 2 to 4, Dimensional Cascade. The summoned magic breaks free, creating an ethereal tornado. Center a 5-inch blast template over the wizard. And every model whose base lies underneath the template risks being hit and suffering a single strength 10 hit with an AP of 4. Blech. I will be curious to see if the templates will make you remove casualties from under the template or if you're going to remove casualties like you normally would. I assume it's just going to be you take a single hit on the model, and then every wound that goes through, you'll just remove casualties as you would in like the shooting or the fight phase. But we will see. So if you get a 2, 3, or 4, you're going to take some damage. It's going to hurt. Calamitous Detonation. A roiling magic explodes. It's a 3-inch blast template at strength 6, AP 2. The wizard mispronounces a syllable, causing the spell. Strength 4, AP 1. Okay. The wizard manages to control the magic. The spell is cast, however, you cannot. Okay. Interesting. And so 7, your wizard just takes a strength 4 hit with an AP of 1. And 8 is you cast your spell at its casting value, and but you're done casting. So if you miscast on your first out of 4 attempts, for example, you're just done. You can't do it with that one. I'm kind of surprised they all don't shut you down, but that's okay. With a deafening boom, the summon magic is unleashed and an unnatural calm descends. The spell is cast with perfect invocation. However, you cannot attempt to cast any more spells. And I assume perfect invocation is like rolling boxcars. So, interesting. Magic is still very much a duel between wizards. It's still perfectly possible to miscast should you roll double 1 or achieve, perfect invocation on a double 6. You can attempt to dispel conjurations provided they're within 18 as first and second level casters or 24 as third and fourth level casters, and you roll 2d6, add your level, and if you beat the casting roll, the spell is canceled. A double 6 is an unbinding, and it dispels no matter the casting roll. But should you roll a double 1, you've been outclassed in the art, and you must roll on the miscast table. So that's interesting. I think it's pretty neat that your dispels actually have some risk. Being able to basically perils if you roll snake eyes on your dispel attempt. I like it. I think it's funny. And then to kind of balance it out, if you roll boxcars, um, you always dispel, it looks like. So I kind of like that the advantage goes to the dispeller on this. That if I roll double 6s, you're shut down. You can't do anything about it. But if I roll double 1s, I could end up. It could be the poopy duty, friend. I do. I enjoy that. Both casting and dispel rolls can be further modified by a wealth of magic items, which, big shock, we already kind of probably knew that. If a player finds themselves unable to attempt a wizard. Hey, what's up? It is going. We are talking about some old world, and I appreciate that my chat bot is working. That makes me happy. It is syncing up all the chats, and they're showing up on screen. So, man, I am loving this now that I understand how it works. Evidently, I was the issue, and that's why it wasn't working. But yeah, we're just talking about old world. I'm going to be cruising through Magic, and we're going to be diving into the Bretonnian leaks. I am really eagerly awaiting old world. I've actually been playing some 8th Ed Fantasy to get prepared for it because the rules actually so far are really similar with some slight tweaks, and I don't think I've seen a change so far that I've not liked. Every change I've seen so far has been a positive change. If a player finds themselves unable to attempt a wizardly dispel, they may make one fated dispel per turn, an unmodified 2d6 attempt. To offset this, certain units, such as dwarves, have an innate resistance to magic, making it harder for enemy wizards to cast spells upon them successfully. Okay. So basically, if you don't have a wizard, this is the way I'm interpreting this, is if you don't have a wizard, you'll just get a generic once per turn dispel attempt, but you don't get to add any modifiers to it. And that's not inherently a bad thing. And again, that's generally how fantasy has always interacted. I don't know about 8th, but I know in 7th there was like ways to get your dispel dice even if you didn't have a wizard. I'm not as familiar with 8th, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you it did. I know you could in the older editions. So let's take a closer look at one of the first spell slingers to be released next year, the Bretonnian Handmaiden of the Lady. From the lowliest first level damsel to the mightiest prophetess, these formidable priestesses of the Lady of the Lake may pick from three spell lores: naturalistic elementalism, tricksy illusion, or battle magic for when a direct approach is best. Man, I'm pumped to start getting some handmaidens and start building or rebuilding my Bretonians. I haven't had a Bretonian army in probably 10 years, but I am excited, man. And it's actually probably been longer ago than that. We're probably closer to 15 if I'm being honest. And look at that handsome handmaiden of the lady. She moves 4 inches, and again, so what we're seeing is the game's going to be a little bit slower, which again it always has been. You know, your movement was always like 4 inches for infantry, maybe 5 for some of it, like elves, if I remember right. 10 inches for a lot of cavalry, and so it's interesting to see that again we're not getting away from it. I really want to see the size of the table. I'm curious to know if we're going to be still on the old boards because I think correct me if I'm wrong, anybody out there that's played Heresy, but I think Heresy still played on the 4x6, right? The 48-inch by 72-inch tables, and not the 44 by 60 that we use for Sigmar and 40K. But if that's the case, like these are going to be some big armies, and yep, and I'm an old world. And I think you're right. I think you're right. I think Old World will absolutely still use them. I'm just curious to know. Like I want to know, right? I assume that is the case, but I want that confirmation. But with Heresy using it, and thank you for confirming that, with Heresy using it, it's a good chance that this will as well, and we'll probably start seeing some 40K boards that size coming out soon. I would have to imagine, because I don't think they sell any Heresy boards, do they, or mats? I think it's all just 40K and AOS stuff right now in terms of getting your boards and mats. I'll have to look at that. So she is regular infantry character, and that's probably just to differentiate between regular infantry, monstrous infantry, etc. Her base size is 25 by 25, and that's also another thing to keep in mind is a lot of the base sizes are going up. So your bases that were on 20s are going to 25s, and GW's already said this. And so if you've got a lot of old world stuff, what I would probably do is rather than rebase everything, I'd probably just get movement trays so that the area that they take up, their footprint, is the same size. You could probably get some sort of like 3D printed converter and that would be fine. But generally speaking, I would probably just drop them on movement trays. I've got a bunch of dryads that I'm considering rebasing because I don't know that I'm going to be playing much Sylvaneth as I continue my Sigmar journey. I have been thoroughly enjoying the Gloomspite Gits, and they feel a bit more in line with how I like to interact. But sorry, a little bit of a tangent. Her unit size is 1, which makes sense. She's a single model character. She has a hand weapon, which means she'll just make her 2 attacks or 1 attack at strength 3. Hand weapons are just strength user, no AP typically. I assume they're no AP because AP is a weapon ability now, or a weapon stat, not inherent based on the strength of the attack. A prophetess is a level 3 wizard. A damsel is a level 1 wizard. They can both be upgraded a level for 30 points. And they know the following lores: battle magic, elementalism, and illusion. You get to pick one of them. And did it say? I think it did. I'm going to scroll up real quick. Unbinding, double counts. Let's just do this. The higher level, the more spells they know what they. Okay, so I'm curious to see if it's a number of spells equal to your level plus the signature spell. She can be mounted, and she may be purchased. So yeah, and this is all pretty standard fare. Sylvaneth is also kind of in a bad place right now in AOS. Sadly, hate when GW changes base sizes, but honestly, 20 millimeters should have been exiled from reality a long time ago. Horrible to try to fit a mini and do, and especially when they've got like the spears or swords and shields, right? Like Skaven, I think were one that were pretty egregious. The you know, anything where you're holding a two-handed weapon across the chest can be pretty brutal. 25s I think are going to be okay for some things, and yeah, exactly. And Sylvaneth, man, like for me, I don't care if they're in a bad spot. Like I didn't get the army because they were good. I got it. Honestly, I didn't even get it to play Sigmar. I ended up getting Sylvaneth because I just liked the tree models more than anything. I did play Wood Elves in Fantasy way back in the day. Also, like my two armies were basically Bretonnians and Wood Elves. Hey, what's up, buddy? Haven't seen you in a while. Um, Yeah, so it's one of those like I didn't get into Sylvaneth because I was like, ooh, trees are good. I just had some store credit from some tournaments that I had won, and I was just like, I don't need anything right now, and I really like these models, and I used to play Wood Elf, so let's pick them up. So I'm waiting until the rules drop. I believe that is a shit show of a unit. Um, Hey, thanks a lot, Harold, the good Harold. I appreciate that, buddy. Uh, really do. Thank you. And so I'm just debating, and once the rules drop, I'm going to be um, looking at the wood elf stuff because it's really going to come down to, are my dryads going to be? Hey, and again, thanks a lot, Rockanos also throwing out the sub. The good Harold throwing out the sub. You guys, I do appreciate it. So that being said, uh, if the dryads are still usable and the tree lord ancients, right? If I'm able to put my plastic tree lord ancients on the table, like they're getting square bases, not even messing with it. But if we're looking at just some, well, if you run your tree lords, you need to get these old metal ones. Then I will just pass and I'll just play my Bretonnians. That's really what it's hinging on. Is Are they going to try to shoehorn me into playing those tiny little tree men? And even if they do, I might just get the Blood Bowl tree men in order to do it. So again, another tangent, as we do. Anybody who's watched any of my live stuff, we like to chat. Aura of the Lady. So she's got special rules. Aura of the Lady, Blessings of the Lady, Lord of the Lady, Magical Attacks, Magical Resistance. I'm curious to see what Magical Resistance does. I wonder if it subtracts 2 from casting rolls for anything that targets her. I don't know, but based on what I'm seeing, that could make sense. And then Shield of the Lady. I'm curious to see what all this stuff does. I'm betting that Blessings of the Lady probably hasn't changed that much from the older editions. So, like, if you were receiving the Blessing of the Lady, you get I think it's a 6-up ward save and a couple other things. I'm very curious to see if they start selling some kits with both square and circle bases. So, um, I will try to find it, but what they did do was they said that there were going to be some kits that are usable in both. So I think what will happen is the stuff that's usable in both will get what the heresy stuff got. So there's still some heresy stuff, right? That you can play in 40K. And I think it's just in the heresy box now, if I'm not mistaken. But there may be a 40K box. But regardless, I think what's going to happen is it's just going to get separated, and then they'll put the squares in one and the circles in the other. Not that that's the best way to do things, but I think that's the route it's going to end up going. I also think as things get repackaged, and this is, before I say this, I just want to say this is speculation. I don't have any insider information. Unfortunately, I do have to say this stuff sometimes. Um, but what I do think is going to happen is we're going to see also a similar thing to what's kind of been done with some of the heresy kits, where instead of here's my 10 model box of Glade Guard, for example, like I think we're going to see more of a Lord of the Rings packaging style where we start getting like 15, 20 models to the box. And it'll cost a little bit more, sure, but I think the per model cost will be a little bit lower and we're going to be buying bigger stuff because historically, fantasy has just been a larger game. So if it continues to be a larger game, in order to kind of mitigate some of that upfront cost, I think we're going to see bigger boxes that are priced a little bit more reasonably. You know, if I'm getting Glade Guard, you might end up buying a box of Glade Guard, and those Glade Guard might run me $70, but I might get 20 of them instead of like $50 for 10 of them, if that makes sense. At least that's my hope. It makes sense, and I have seen that some of the Heresy stuff is priced that way. I don't really play Heresy. I'm not a fan of the older editions of 40K at this point in my life. I did play older editions, but 8th Ed to me was very good. It was a very good step in the right direction. 9th Ed had its ups and downs, so did 8th, but 9th Ed was also very good to me. Like, I'm pretty happy with the direction 40K went with 8th and 9th compared to, like 7th, 6th, 5th. So, but yeah, getting back on topic, man, I'm gonna need some sort of like alert or alarm button every time we end up going off on a tangent, and then I gotta come back. Or of the lady, like I said, I think we're gonna see not a huge change. I think we're just gonna maybe see a few updates. Remember that Bretonnia hasn't seen a rule book since 6th ed. So if you played 7th and you played 8th, uh yeah, you could get me on a tangent for any game that I like to play. Like you start talking Blood Bowl, I can talk Blood Bowl. You start talking Necromunda, I can do that. Like I could just get on wild tangents for just about any game GW makes, with the exception of like Warcry and Underworlds. Not because I don't like them, I just haven't really played them. All right, so as you can see, she comes with plenty of options. Take her as a lowly first level conjurer or a mighty fourth level archmage, and she can be mounted on a warhorse, a Bretonnian warhorse, or a royal Pegasus or a unicorn. Let's go! Handmaidens on Pegasus and unicorn. I'm about it. And then the unicorn, so like if we see the troop type, it says monstrous cavalry, and that's what I kind of figured the regular infantry was going to do. Weapon skill 4, strength 4, wounds +1. Interesting. So I wonder if being mounted will actually give you an additional wound now, which I think makes sense, especially since we don't have to differ. I'm hoping this would be another positive change where we're not randomizing hits between the horse and the rider for some reason. That was always kind of a weird thing. Like I guess for characters, it wasn't so bad because if I remember right, there were rules for being dismounted from like your horse in the older editions. Again, I'm not gonna say 8th Ed had it because I don't know off the top of my head. It does have a 40 by 60 base, unit size 1, hooves and horn, counts as a hand weapon, armor bane 2, the unicorn only. So the unicorn, okay, and so armor bane, I think we're gonna cover that in the next chunk of this video. But if I remember right, that's like wounds of 6, increase your AP by whatever the armor bane rating is. Armored hide 1, I assume, increases your armor save by whatever that is. And then beguiling aura, I couldn't even hazard a guess. Counter charge, all this stuff I don't want to make any kind of speculation on. I honestly have no clue. I wonder if the stomp attacks single attack type of thing. Let's see. She's at her best when she's joined by a unit, as her aura confers magical attacks and magic resistance to the. Oh, hold up. So that insinuates that any special rules you have transfer over to whatever unit you are in. Unless that is part of these auras here. This aura of the lady might be the rule that causes that. If it's not, then she transfers her special rules over. I'm guessing because of this wording, it's the aura of the lady that does it. Her aura confers magical attacks. And so if you don't know, magical attacks are literally just that. They don't do anything special. They basically give your attacks the magic keyword, if I remember right, and that helps overcome certain types of like resistances, etc. And magical resistance -2 to the brave men and women she leads, and her Shield of the Lady ability allows her to seek sanctuary in the back rank. Oh, she gets to fight like a Skaven. No, and that makes sense because she needs to be protected. Historically, you could put her like in the middle of the knights, if I remember right. Um, as a battle magic user, her signature spell is Hammer Hand, an assailment cast in combat to add considerable threat to the charge of the noble knights who flank her. Elementalists can storm call an enemy unit, slowing them and dulling their wits to soften them up for the charge, while illusionists may cast a glittering robe on their allies, making them harder to hit. No knights of the realm should leave the keep without a damsel in tow. So let's check out Ham Hands. And again, if you don't know, that's just like one of the colloquialisms we have for this spell because it's a Grey Knight spell. And our local Grey Knights players, like, we just kind of tease them. It's an assailment cast at 7, but remember you're adding your wizard. She's a Grey Knight. She's way cooler than a Grey Knight, man. We got a saying up north here, buddy, and it's all my homies love Xenos. All right, there's no love for that Imperium stuff for the most part. Let's see. Casting value 7. Remember you're adding uh yeah, man, and I wish that wasn't true. As a person, I don't know when you got into 40K, buddy, but as a person who started way back in the 90s with 3rd edition, we weren't at a point where Marines were the good guys, right? Like, we were at a point where everything was still kind of vague. We didn't necessarily have these protagonists, and it wasn't as story centric in terms of like official story and stuff. But as Marines have kind of taken center stage and really just become the focal point of the game, the poster children of the game, I feel like they've just become very bland and very Mary Sue-ish. But really what that stems from, to be honest, is so like my group that I play with regularly when we play 40K, we have a out of the 10 that I play with regularly, we have an orc player, and this is just like what they play 90% of the time. We have an orc player, we have a Tau player, we have a Tyranid player, we have a Craft World player, we have a Votan player, and then I've been rocking Drukhari for like the last year or two pretty hard. So you figure 60 to 70% of us just play some form of Xenos. And then there's two Space Marine players, and then there's one dude who just kind of like bounces around the Imperium. And that's pretty much it. And it's so funny. Like, when people would come to my store for tournaments, they were always surprised at how many Xenos players there were just regularly, and it's so funny. So anyway, casting value 7+, you're adding your wizard level, so you really need a 6 on the dice, right? 6 plus 1 for a level 1 wizard is 7. So that means you're actually pretty likely to cast things with a casting value of 7. A single enemy unit the caster is engaged in combat with suffers 2d3 strength 4 hits, each with an AP of 2. Yeah, I don't recall. That's fair. And I mean, we probably had one or two, but yeah, no, for the most part, like, the local community that I had built really just was very Xenos centric. And even when we travel, like, we went to Lafayette to do a tournament, and there was like 6 or 7 of us that went there, and it was all Space Marines and then us. Like, it was so funny. I do like that Magic, they haven't gone the mortal wound route. Like, they're not doing the Sigmar 40K, you just take damage, no save allowed, etc. I do appreciate that. I appreciate that we are just doing the hits as it should be. And because strength doesn't infer any AP and things just have an AP characteristic, I feel like that's a little bit more concise and easier to manage. Glittering Robe signature spell. So yeah, we're looking at signature spells. This goes off on an 8, so a 7 for a level 1 wizard. Let's see. Until your next start of turn subphase, enemy units. When does this? Okay. It's an enchantment, so I think that's the start of turn subphase when you cast it also. Until your next start of turn subphase, enemy units suffer a -1 modifier to any hit rolls to hits made against the caster and any unit they have joined. If this spell is cast, the effects of any other enchantment previously cast on the effective models immediately expire. All right, let's unpack this real quick. So basically, until the start of your next turn, enemy units suffer a -1 modifier to hit rolls made against the caster and the unit. Okay, so you cast it on yourself. When you cast it, it cancels out any other enchantments that you may have already had on you, and then all attacks coming at you suffer a -1 to hit penalty, which is pretty solid. I assume. I'm not going to say it is, but I assume it's solid. If memory serves me correctly, like the hit rolls are still table based, and if they are, it could end up being pretty good. And it's definitely going to really help you against shooting attacks. -1, yes. Well, and it was it. I think it has been historically. Like I said, I've played 5th, 6th, and 7th, and I'm just now dabbling in 8th, and I don't like my autism hasn't kicked in with 8th edition to the point where I just have that whole rule set memorized the way I've been able to just like absorb 40k, absorb Sigmar, etc. Um, but I will say, if memory serves, even 5th, 6th, and 7th, -1 was super strong, and especially against ranged attacks, because a lot of times those ranged attacks already had a lot of -1s to hits, and they could stack. Like if you were in long range, you were -1 to hit. If I remember correctly, if you moved, you were -1 to hit, like to your own hit rolls. So, and with all of those stacking, like you could go from hitting on 3s to 5s or 6s real fast. And then Elementalism is a hex with a casting value of 7 and a range of 12 until the start of your next turn. The target enemy suffers a -1 modifier to its movement and initiative characteristics to a minimum of 1 if this spell is cast. Okay, so I'm noticing a pattern here. It looks like you're probably not going to be able to layer a ton of spells onto a single unit, right? If you look, right, and it's going to keep certain armies from really giving people the feels bads, because historically the magic phase for elf armies, right? Like even as a wood elf player, like I remember people being like, "Oh God, it's your magic phase. I'll go make a sandwich and come back when you're done." So it's one of those like, I get it. It definitely is going to help some of those armies from really giving the feel bads, and that's going to be good. And you're not going to have to necessarily keep track of a ton of things on a single unit. In summary, though the magic system may be simplified from it, retains tactical depth, blah, 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 blah. So I'm really. Ooh, universal special rules, you say? I guess we might do that. Yeah, that's probably what we'll jump to. Because I thought they did a Bretonnian thing, although this might be together. So the only thing that I want to know, because they had mentioned that you're going to alternate casting, but if I remember right, it was you're alternating casting in a specific phase. I assume that's going to be in all phases. But if I remember right, the reference that they made was when you cast these types of spells in this phase, you and your opponent are going to take turns casting. So I might try to dig that up before. Actually, I think it's this one. Yeah, all right. I didn't want you to move the screen. I just wanted you to tell me where the words are. Uh, yep. Okay. So this is where the wording gets a little tricky. However, in the third step of the strategy phase is conjuration, which is when you cast enchantments, magical boosts for your allies, or hexes, so your buffs and debuffs. Players take it in turns during this step to choose wizards who aren't fleeing to attempt to cast spells. So again, it makes me wonder if we're going to have a magic sub phase to every phase, or if it's only this specific one where we're going to alternate. It would feel very weird if it's only this specific one. I feel like the game flow and the game mechanics would make a lot more sense if every phase just had a casting sub phase that we enter into, we take turns casting, and then we move on. So like in the movement phase, if I want to do my movement buffs, and it's my turn, all right, I'm done moving, for example, and I don't know when it's gonna be yet. I'm really haranguing my boss to get me a copy of the rules, but I don't think they're gonna give them to me. But what I will say is like it would make sense if like at the beginning of the movement phase, for example, this is the casting sub phase of the movement phase. I cast, you cast, I cast, you cast, and then we move to the next phase, etc., etc. What's going to be very jarring and awkward is if it's only in the strategy phase that we do this weird interactive back and forth. So I'll be curious to see how it goes. My assumption and my guess is that every phase will have some sort of casting sub phase, and that we're going to alternate casting every magic sub phase. But we'll see. I expect the rules will probably be out sometime in January or February, so we'll see. Okay, so the Bretonnians were the USRs. Perfect. So let's check those guys out. Old World Almanac, Living Saints, and Special Rules. The Grail Knights are the epitome of the Bretonnian. So, man, played a game of 40K or Sigmar, I should say. And somebody called their oh god, what is it? The Slanesh unit. They were like my epitome, and I was like, I'm not gonna say anything. I'm just gonna let it slide. He's probably just being a clown and doing it on purpose. And then he was like, his epitome, and like did it the whole game. And I was just like, man, all right, buddy, you do know it's epitome, right? And he was like, are you shitting me? And I was like, no, man, like, that's how you say that. And he was like, oh, shit, I've been doing it wrong this whole time. Like, dude genuinely didn't know. And I try not to correct people for the way that they speak. It's just one of those things like my mom was big on grammar and English growing up. I'm big on grammar and English. And it's just one of those where I have to kind of fight that impulse a lot of times. But after 3 hours of listening to homie saying epitome, I was just like, no, I cannot do this. We need to we need to address this now. I'm sorry. I cannot let you live your life living with this ignorance. Right? It's brutal, man. And it's one of those where I get it. I don't expect people to speak perfectly all the time, but it's just like if I've got to sit here and have a conversation with you and it's a word that we're going to be saying a lot, I've got to let you know when it's just not right. And I honestly, I expect people to do the same for me. Hey man, this is actually how you say that. Oh, all right, cool. The ideal of chivalry, warriors of immeasurable prowess and exemplars of courage, virtue, and noblesse oblige. Arguably the most devastating heavy cavalry plying their trade on the old world. These are okay. Cool, cool, cool. All right, Grail Knights, 38 points a model. Seems expensive. I actually have no idea how much they used to be. I'm gonna look. We're gonna look this up right now. We're gonna go on an adventure. Like, what? Oh, give me a second. I have I have two sick children, and one of them has had the bubble guts for a bit now. So, all right, boop boop. Battle scribe. I mean, no, I don't use that. Um, Grail Knights. Let's find them. Those are they rare? I bet they're rare. Okay, so that's actually pretty close to what they were. Uh, that's exactly what they were. Okay, so 38. I forgot that those were the rare ones. 38 points a model, and I'll be curious to know if yep, that's what I was getting ready to say, and I just needed to scroll a little further. Grail Knights, interesting. So the horse doesn't give an extra wound here, and it doesn't have the +1, but the unicorn did, and it could just be because it's a monstrous mount or whatever. It's interesting though. Weapon skill 6, ballistic skill 2, big shock. They probably don't have any access to range attacks anyway. Strength 4, T4, 1 wound. Oh, excuse me. Initiative of 5, which is interesting. And I want to say there was something about charging an initiative. I could be wrong, but I feel like there was. Grail Knights get 2 attacks each and a leadership of 9. They are equipped with hand weapons, lances, heavy armor, and shields, and then their war horses have iron shod hooves, which just count as hand weapons, and barding. So each warhorse will make 1 attack, and then each Grail Knight will make 2, and then the Sergeant is what that Guardian is, will make 3. Unit size of 3 or more. Any unit may upgrade 1 model to a Grail Guardian, which is a champion at 7 points per unit. So, sorry, Bretonnian players, you no longer get free unit champions, but I think that comes with just finally getting updated rules. And then upgrade 1 model to a musician, upgrade 1 to a standard bearer, and then you can also purchase a magical standard worth up to 100 points. I assume that's if you take the standard bearer, that would make sense. A Grail Guardian may take a single knightly virtue or magical items. Oh, I guess both. It doesn't say or. Magic items up to a total of 50 points. The reason or came out of my mouth is in the older editions, you got a total number of points that you could split between the two, if I remember correctly. I'd have to double check that. But they also have Blessings of the Lady, Close Order, Countercharge, Finest War Horses, blah, 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 blah. Finest War Horses is probably what keeps them from losing movement for having barding, assuming they still have that rule. Let's see. Weapon skill of 6, 5 initiative, and 2 attacks. Heavy armor shields have a save of 2 plus or 3 plus. I feel like that is not what they used to be. I thought barding and mounted and heavy armor and a shield got you to a 2 plus. Correct me if I'm wrong, if you guys know, but I want to say that it used to be when you were mounted and had barding and all these other things, you were at a 2 plus armor save. And that could just be a change from last edition or from fantasy to old world, and it could just be a typo, and I could be remembering it wrong. But lances give them +2 strength on the turn they charged and armor bane. So the lance with armor and shield and Bard and Bretonnia, they have a save of 3 plus. While the lances give them +2 strength on. Here it is. I was like, they always have strength +2. It doesn't matter if they charged. Just read the text. So you can only use a lance on a turn in which you charged, and then you have to use your hand weapon or whatever other weapon you might have. I assume you'll have access with certain models to other things. Yeah, yeah. Uh, you know what? Now we're gonna look. Hey, another tangent. Let's go. Saves. This website is awesome too. Don't think that's it. So heavy armor and shield got you to a 4+. And I want to say being mounted added 1 to it, right? And then being, this is not in here, barding also added 1 to it. Yep. Okay. So it did go from 2 up to 3 up. So either the save calculation has changed, or we just have a typo. One of the two. I thought so. All right. So 2 attacks, strength 6 in this case because it's user plus 2, AP 2, and armor bane 1. So your wounds of 6 will actually be AP 3, which is really good actually. Armor bane, blah 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 blah. So and this is where it explains armor bane. Probably no bonus from barding anymore. That actually could make sense. Although, I don't know. Because it says they have barding. Maybe barding just does something different. I guess that's fair. Or maybe there's no bonus for being mounted anymore. And that could be the difference. If a model with this special rule rolls a natural 6 when making a roll to wound, yep. We already knew that. Close order. As a good example, in the past, you had to know that units that weren't skirmishers or fast cavalry operated in ranks and files. What we now know as close order. So close order is just rank and file units. Every unit has all its formations listed as a USR, calling this out and clarifying. Stomp attacks. Okay, so here's the unicorn. Were once listed under monster rules, but now as a USR. It's going to be more deliberate which monsters have the rule and which don't. Okay. All right. So close order just means it's a rank and file unit. Curious to know what countercharge is. Blessings of the Lady. An army-wide rule for the Kingdom of Bretonnia. Instead of rolling to see who goes first, a Bretonnian army may instead kneel to pray for the protection of the Lady of the Lake. It gives you a 6-up ward save against any wounds suffered, or a 5-up against wounds of strength 5 or more. And if you flee for any reason or decline a challenge, your unit loses the blessing. So this really isn't any different. I believe the strength trigger was like a optional thing, if I remember right, but it could be the same. It's generally the same. And for those that don't know, if you're not a fantasy player that are watching, a ward save is it's weird. It's kind of like a feel no pain. It's kind of like an invuln. The reason it's like a feel no pain is almost everything in this game is 1 wound, right? Um, so it's just one of those where it's kind of like that. It's an unmodifiable save that you get. Close order we've already covered already. Countercharge, here we go, is effective against monsters, cavalry, and chariots. If our Grail Knights are charged by units such as these from a longer distance than their attacker's movement characteristic, they can spur their horses D3 plus 1 inch in response, and both parties count as charging, and initiative then comes into play. Interesting. I'm going to have to see that. I thought there was something about charging, but I didn't think there was any kind of like fight first. I'll have to double check that one when we're done here. Finest war horses, such as the quality that you may reroll any ones when you charge, flee, or pursue before discarding any dice. Okay, so interesting. I honestly, for some things, I don't mind. I really don't. I do get that it's like, come on, man, why are we doing this? Um, it's one of those like, I don't know how else you would do that this specific interaction right here, because you don't want it to be a D6. That would be way too high. I don't know. Like I said, it is especially for damage, like 40k D3 damage. Yeah, flat 3 is good too. But 40k D3 damage was the worst. Um, I'm trying to remember why. I had bought a shitload of D3s, and there was a specific unit that I had bought them for, and I'm trying to remember what it was. And I'm trying to remember if it was an orc unit or not. Seems reasonable, but I can't off for the life of me think of what it was. Like something had D3 damage probably, or D3 attacks. It had to have been D3 attacks, and it was just like I just had this brick of D3s, and I would just roll this brick of D3s, and what would throw people off is I would tell them, "Hey man, this is a D3. It has three numbers, 1, 2, and 3. Like I have a bunch of them. I'm gonna roll them for damage. Blah 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 blah." And every time I would roll them, people would be like, "That's a 2, man," or "That's a 1." These are D3s. Yeah, I know they're D3s. It says right in the rule. No, like they're literally D3s, and I'd have to hand them one. It was just just a nice little anecdote, something that I've done. Let's see. Finest war horses so they can reroll. Blah blah blah. If their first charge of the game makes contact, the target loses its rank bonus until the next round of combat. That's pretty spicy. Lance formation allows Bretonnia Knights to form their signature devastating charge formation, offering them a choice between this and close order. Okay, so that's cool. I have to see how the Lance has changed, if it's changed. Living Saints is a great example of a unique special rule. These Grail Knights are such mighty warriors that they can individually issue challenges to enemy characters. Goblin bosses, watch out. Swift Stride adds a further 3 inches to your maximum charge range and plus d6 to any given charge, flight, or pursuit. Wait, what the honk? Swift Stride, okay. So, things with Swift Stride, if I'm reading this right, add 3 inches to their maximum charge range and an additional d6 to any charge. Okay. My brain was reading that as a d6 plus 3, and I thought that's a weird way to word that, and I had to read it. So you can add it. Okay. Cool, cool, cool. So Swift Stride just gives you an extra d6 to charge and then increases your maximum charge range by 3 inches. The Grail Vow provides further benefits. They're unaffected by fear and terror, and they fight with magical attacks. And the first time they fail a break test, they may automatically fall back in good order. On top of that, you can load up on even more abilities with magic items. Yeah. We already know that. Virtue of the Impetuous Knight. So the virtues were cool. What they were was like you could buy virtues for certain units, and they would give that unit or model a special rule. A model with this virtue gains the impetuous rule. In addition, this model and its unit increases its maximum possible charge range by 3. And finally, hey, it's another D3. When this model and its unit make a charge roll, you may apply a plus D3 modifier to the result. Yeah, that's hilarious. That is absolutely hilarious. Being able to charge D6 plus D6 plus D3 plus your move, right? Like, sure, man. And then the magic weapon. What do we have? Combat strength. That does say S. Curious to know what a strength of S means. I'm wondering if that's user, maybe? I don't know. I have no clue what strength of S would mean. Magical attacks, Monster Slayer. Unit carrying the blazing banner gains a flaming attack special rule. Okay. Universal blah 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 blah. Okay, so yeah. So next up, which will be I think next week, we're gonna have army selection. I wanted to check one thing here. I think it was the charging, right? Which is done in the movement. Let's double check that. Charge. Oh, here's the lance. Cool, cool, cool. I'll be curious to know what bonuses it gives though. The initiative. That's what I wanted to look up. Guess what's not in here, friend? any reference to initiative. So let's go to combat and see if it's in there. And if not, we'll probably be wrapping up soon. This has been a pretty long and fun chat with everybody. Oh gosh, imagine not being able to spell and having it beep at you. The model with the highest initiative characteristic strikes first, and so on down the order, with a bonus for charging and a bigger one for hitting them in the flank or rear. There could still be a situation, however, in which a lumbering fool like a troll. Okay. So we don't know what the bonus for charging is. We just know there is a bonus for charging. You roll as many dice as models have attacks with a higher initiative model striking. So yeah, okay. Wait, it did. Yeah. Yeah, so we don't know what the bonus is. We just know that there is a bonus for charging. That's all I wanted to check. I will say, if you don't need that. I will say, if you are generally local, I will be looking to run some old world events. This coming year, I will be running. I've opened my repertoire to running 40K AOS. I'm going to include Old World. I'm actually working on a competitive play Old World packet right now that'll include like different ways to score. And this is based under the assumption that the game's not going to have much in the terms of competitive play. So what I'm doing is I'm working on different objectives that you could score without having to hold actual objective markers on the table. So it's one of those where that's one of the reasons I've been playing 8th Ed is so that I can play test those to some degree, so that once Old World hits, I'll at least have some feedback and some information and be able to go, oh, okay, well, this generally works. We may just need to tweak it because of this change in the rules. And a lot of it is predicated on making sure you're interacting rather than just camping. I played a game with my buddy. We just played a different rank and file fantasy game. But as a classic dwarf player, I spent the first 2 turns moving to him as he just sat there. And I was just like, cool, man. Like, God, I hate dwarfs so bad. Every game I play, it's just like, yeah, all right. What a fun game this is. I'm glad you just sit there. So it's just one of those like the objectives are set up to promote, at least some form of movement. I'm trying to outline some terrain layouts and stuff, whether it's player placed or whether it's static, like a set layout. But the point is that like I have been working on this. These are things that I've been and trying to hammer out. I play one game of fantasy every week on average. It's been 2 some weeks, it's been none some weeks, but we have been playing it so that we can test these rules. Once the packet is done and Old World is out, I'll release it into the wild and let people kind of play around with it, tell me what they think needs changed, and really that's it. Like that's where we're at. So if the game comes out in January, I'll probably plan for one in February or March. And then if the game comes out in February, I'll probably plan for, man, planning for April is going to be tough. Like the first half of my year is always a lot busier than the second half, but we'll make sure something happens there. So all right, that's going to wrap us up. I appreciate everybody sitting and enjoying the look at the old world and some anecdotes and some tangents and some wild conversations. You guys, I appreciate the subscriptions again. Uh, awesome. Always appreciate the support that everybody has shown me. I do have a web store going up, so if you're still with me, it's actually up already. There's a link in the description, but the inventory is pretty low right now, and the way it's going to work, and it's Generally, most of the things in the web store are going to be, if they're GW, they're going to be 10% off retail. And then I'm going to be generating coupon codes for my patrons and my Twitch subscribers, and I've got to finish outlining all the details on that. But then that'll they will benefit from an additional 10% off. So a lot of that stuff's going to be anywhere from 10 to 20% off if you're a subscriber or a patron, and that's how we're going to work that. That being said, I will be working on that stuff this week. Again, I appreciate you. You guys have a great day.